عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين ونصلي على رسوله الكريم نبينا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. اللهم علمنا بما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. When Hafiz Sahib said all the men have photographic memory, it reminded me of, there's that joke for those of you that are married, when your wife tells you to go grab stuff from the grocery store and then she gives you a list and she's like, you want to write this down? Like, no, I'll remember. And then 5 minutes later, you're blowing up your wife's phone. Oh, did you ask for parsley? Did you ask for cilantro? What's the difference? I don't know. So that always happens. But alhamdulillah, I'm hoping to keep this simple and easy to understand. And my main goal is to, number one, give you an overview of what you'll be doing, but also to kind of help set your expectations that, especially a lot of you, mashallah, raised your hands that you're going to Hajj for the very first time. Hafiz Sahib asked if you've been for Hajj, but how many of you have been for Umrah before? So you guys have already been for Umrah, right? So raise your hand if you've never been for Hajj or Umrah. Okay, mashallah. So you're basically jumping into the deep end head first. Because Umrah, of course, you see it as a lesser pilgrimage. It's a Hajj light, right? It's not as demanding physically or financially as Hajj is. But I'd like to begin with going over briefly what we're going to be going over in 6 parts. So I'll have my human clicker, Aman, handle the slides. So we have the introduction. I'll go over the definition of Hajj, and we'll go over some aspects of Hajj, and then the virtues, what it means for a Muslim to go for Hajj, to complete their Hajj. Then, of course, the meat of the topic, which is the steps, the rites, the manasik, what you'll be going through as you go through your Hajj. Then there's something that a lot of people worry about. I get questions whether I'm there at Hajj or whether I'm sitting here in America, in Texas, that, oh, this happened, what do I do about this? This happened, do I have to make up for it? What do I have to do? So I get a lot of these questions every year during Hajj time. And then number 5, whether you go before or after, majority of the people end up visiting Medina. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Medina is a place that I can proudly call home. I was blessed to live there for 6 years, and it's a place that, of course, if you're going for the first time, then you'll know once you get there. You'll feel it once you get there. There's really nothing much I can say about that, and if you've been there, then you know what I'm talking about. And then 6, just a few extras that I thought might come in handy for those of you that are going, whether it's your first time or your 10th time. Next slide, you can skip the next one, introduction. Okay, so the definition of Hajj, right? Anytime, Hafiz Sahib said, I was a nerd, but I was one of those lazy nerds, but I still like the nerdy aspects of these things. You always get into the linguistics or the definitions when it comes to Islamic related topics. Linguistically, the word Hajj is derived from the Arabic word hajja, and it means to exert effort, to set out to a great place. And from the Sharia perspective, Hajj means to take oneself to a certain place at a particular time to perform certain devotional acts as required by Islam. And we'll go over what that means. So next slide. What is the particular place? Of course we know it is the Kaaba, Al-Masjid Al-Haram, as well as the sites in and around Mecca, including Arafah, Mina, and Muzdalifah. The time for Hajj can only be performed during specific months, right? Hajj can only be performed during specific months, and I'll explain this a little bit. You have Shawwal, Dhul Qa'dah, and the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So the last 3 months of the Islamic calendar, these are known as the months of Hajj. Because what's right before Shawwal? Ramadan. Right before Shawwal is Ramadan. You're not going to be preparing for Hajj during Ramadan. You're not going to travel during Ramadan. Especially back in the day, if you were to set forth for Hajj, it would be a long journey. It might take months. Right? My wife told me that her grandparents even had stories of having to go for Hajj by ship. Right? They lived in Karachi, so there's a port. It's a port city. You get on the boat and then you ride all the way to the next port or wherever you're going to go. Maybe it's Jeddah, maybe it's on the eastern side. Who knows? But it was a long journey. And without ships, they used to go in caravans, by camel, by horse, by donkey, whatever it was, by foot. So it's a long journey. Just the journey from Mecca to Medina, right? The hijrah itself that the Prophet ﷺ took about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. Right? So if that was just from Mecca to Medina, imagine you're coming from Morocco, you're coming from India, right? You're coming from some of the European countries. Right? It would take more than 2 weeks, a month, maybe 2 months. So you set forth during Shawwal. That's why these months are known as the months of Hajj. And then of course, the Hajj itself takes place in the first 10 days of Dhul Hijjah. So on the next slide, we talk about the obligation of Hajj. When does Hajj become obligatory? Right? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. That perform the Hajj and the Umrah for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In another ayah, it also says, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. That for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is upon mankind to perform the Hajj to the house, meaning the Kaaba, for those who are capable of doing so. You're capable, and you can traverse the path. And then, famously in the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we know that him and his son Ismail alayhi salam, they built the Kaaba. And once the Kaaba was built, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He commanded Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا. That go and call the people for Hajj. Go give the adhan for Hajj. And the men will come. The people will come. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he thought, how can I just go on top of this mountain and that mountain and just call the people? Mecca was not a very populated area. There wasn't a lot of cities around to populate it. How are the people around the world? Right? This wasn't a call for just the Muslims or the believers. This was a call for mankind. How are they going to hear? And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala affirmed and confirmed with Ibrahim alayhi salam that you just make the call and you leave it to us, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to have that call enter the hearts of the people. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, it was said he got on top of Mount Arafah. It was said that he got on top of Mount Safa and Mount Marwa, and he made the call. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He made that call reach the hearts of all of mankind, and they began coming to perform the Hajj every year since then. In the Sunnah, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he narrates that the Prophet ﷺ, Allah's Messenger ﷺ, addressed us and he said, "O people, Allah has made Hajj obligatory for you, so perform Hajj." And this is narrated in Muslim. And majority of the scholars believe that Hajj was made obligatory in the 9th year after the Hijrah. In that year, the Prophet ﷺ was unable to accompany the Muslims in Hajj, so he sent his representative, Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, to lead the Muslims in Hajj that year. And then in the year afterwards, the Prophet ﷺ performed his one and only Hajj during his lifetime, Hajjatul Wida', which was very well documented, and you can find all of that information from the Prophet's Hajj sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, next we go on to the virtues of Hajj. So, first virtue, Hajj removes sins. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Whoever performs Hajj for Allah's sake and does not speak obscenely, nor commits acts of impiety, he returns home free of sin like the day his mother gave birth to him. So you've probably heard this. If you perform Hajj, then you'll come back like a newborn baby, right? Sinless. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anh, he also narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, alternate between Hajj and Umrah regularly. So you can perform Hajj 1 year, or maybe in between Hajjs you can perform an Umrah, or you just alternate however you can. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the ability to and gives us the opportunity to. Because if we do that, then the two remove poverty and sins, just as the blacksmith's bellows, right? If you know how a blacksmith works, they take pure iron or pure gold or any pure metal, and they remove all of the impurities in a fire, right? They have like an oven or a furnace which they stick the metal into. So it removes all impurities from iron, gold, and silver. There is no reward for an accepted Hajj, meaning a Hajj Mabrur, except paradise. The reward of Hajj Mabrur, accepted Hajj, is paradise. So there's other narrations that talk about an accepted Hajj. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, he reports that all sins committed in between the performance of one Umrah and another. So from one Umrah to the next Umrah, all of the sins in between are forgiven. They're expiated and erased. And there's no reward for a Hajj Mabrur except paradise. Right? So that is the baseline reward that you receive for an accepted Hajj. Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah, he said that Hajj Mabrur is a Hajj after which an aversion for the material worldly life is created and an inclination to the hereafter is brought about. So sometimes you'll hear this word Hajj Mabrur or you'll hear Hajj Maqbul. What does that mean? So the scholars, they actually differentiate between the two. Hajj Maqbul can mean that you went, you performed Hajj, you did all the obligatory actions, you didn't leave anything out, and you completed it. Right? So you performed the physical aspect of the Hajj and you did it all and it was correct. But maybe you had committed a sin here and there. Maybe you said something bad. Maybe, you weren't exactly nice to everybody. Right? So that can affect the quality of your Hajj, although it could still be maqbool, that you performed everything and you don't have to make anything up. Hajj Mabrur, right? Because maqbool literally means accepted. Mabrur means blessed, right? But in this context, it also means accepted. But what does mabrur mean as opposed to maqbool? It means that you went and performed Hajj, you had sincerity, you did not commit any sins, right? You did not, as it says here, for instance, you weren't mean to anybody, you didn't use foul language, you were patient, right? Your Hajj was, in a sense, perfect, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الحج أشهر معلومات فمن فرض فيهن الحج فلا رفث ولا فسوق ولا جدال في الحج. Right? When you go for Hajj, you have to maintain your composure. You cannot curse anybody. You shouldn't be fighting with anybody. Right? You shouldn't be committing any heinous acts. Because it's not easy. Hajj is very difficult. We said in the definition of Hajj, it means to put forth great effort. To put forth some effort. And, Hajj, it's that pillar of Islam that challenges us both physically and financially, and it also challenges our patience to the utmost limit. Right? So when people, no matter how much you pay, if you buy the most VIP deluxe package, let's say you're doing Hajj even with the royal family, right? Because their Hajj it's pretty luxurious and pretty easy. They have a special underground tunnel that takes them to throw the stones for the jamarat. So, regardless, there will still be some form of difficulty. You should not think that I paid so many thousands of dollars, right? Let's say you bought the most deluxe VIP Hajj and it cost you like 25K per person. You will still face some form of difficulty So we have to keep our composure, especially if we want the highest quality Hajj, a Hajj that is not just maqbool but mabrur, that will at the very least enter us into paradise. Hajj is also a safeguard from punishment. Aisha radiallahu anha narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, there is no day wherein Allah saves more of His servants from the fire of hell than the day of Arafah. He draws near and praises them to the angels, saying, what do my servants want? Okay, next slide. Hajj is one of the best deeds. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu reports that the Prophet ﷺ was asked, what is the best deed? He replied, to have faith in Allah and His Messenger. And then the questioner asked, what next? And the Prophet ﷺ said, to strive in the cause of Allah. He was then asked, what is the next best thing? He replied, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to perform Hajj Mabrur. And then Hajj is also a form of jihad. It is a type of struggle that we go through. As I mentioned, it tests you physically, financially, it tests your patience, it tests your composure, it tests your character. So Aisha radiallahu anha reports that she once said, O Prophet of Allah, jihad is the best deed. Should we women then not actively participate in it? You know, like if it's the best deed, how can we participate in it? What can we do? How can we have a part in it? The Prophet ﷺ replied, the best jihad for you is Hajj Mabrur. And then of course pilgrims, as Hafsa mentioned, are the guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, pilgrims are the guests of Allah. Should they supplicate, Allah will answer their supplications. Should they seek forgiveness, Allah will forgive them. And this hadith is graded as Hasan. And you know, it's such a privilege that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has invited you all to His house to perform Hajj. And this is something that we have to keep in mind when we go, that yes, you are in a special place at a special time. It is very privileged that not everybody gets to experience in their lifetime, maybe ever, and we have to be appreciative of that fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has called us, and we don't know when or if we'll ever be called back again. So we have to make sure to take full advantage of that. And of course, those who go for Hajj, they have a title that they are Duyufur Rahman. Right? Dayf means guest, so Duyuf is the plural of that, the guests of Ar-Rahman, the most especially merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay. Next, you can go to conditions for Hajj. The conditions for Hajj are pretty straightforward. You have to be a Muslim. Before, Hajj was for everybody. So that's why you still had the Mushrikun, the Quraysh. They would perform Hajj. You had people coming from all over Arabia performing Hajj. We have narrations that mention that even from the Christians and the Jews, they would perform Hajj. And now, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when it was mandated, made obligatory that it would be only for the Muslims, you have to be a Muslim, you have to have reached the age of puberty for your Hajj to count as your one Hajj in your lifetime. So then people ask, okay, what if I want to take my children, does it still count? It's an accepted Hajj, you're still rewarded for it, but when that child reaches the age of puberty, they still have to go and perform Hajj, the one Hajj of their lifetime. So you still have to go during adulthood. And even to the point, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is ever merciful to where if a woman goes and she is pregnant, that even the unborn child or the fetus within her womb also gets reward for Hajj. And the parents also get reward for taking their child for Hajj. So yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. Ameen. You have to be of sound mind. You have to be able to maintain your sanity. Does that mean that somebody who does not have a sound mind cannot go for Hajj? No, they still can. It's like a minor. They can go for Hajj. They can still perform all of the acts of Hajj and they'll be rewarded. But these conditions are for Hajj to be obligatory upon an individual. So it's not obligatory upon them. But let's say you're normally of sound mind, but then something happens and you lose your sanity, and it could be for a short period of time. Once you regain your sanity, then the obligation comes back upon the individual. Now here's the big part. The ability to perform Hajj plays a big role, right? So ability is both physically, financially. Physically meaning that you are physically capable of making the journey. You go there, you're able to perform all of the rites and rituals of Hajj. You can do so on your own without any problem. This is the physical aspect. Financially, you can pay for the journey, going and returning, right? Round trip. You can pay for your accommodations there. You can pay for yourself, feeding yourself, right? So your journey going and returning home from Hajj, you can cover all of that. But you also need to make sure that you can provide for those who are under your care. You cannot just save up and go for Hajj and leave your family without any money. They can't be destitute, they can't be thinking, where is my next meal going to come from? How are we going to pay the rent? If that is the situation, then Hajj is not obligatory upon you. Let's say you're financially capable but not physically capable. It's not obligatory, but you can still go and perform Hajj, right? We always have people who will go and perform Hajj on a wheelchair, or maybe they have a limp or whatever, they need some extra accommodation, then you're still able to do so. Let's say you're physically able but not financially able. If somebody offers to pay for your Hajj, you can still go, and your Hajj will count for yourself, but not as your obligatory Hajj. It'll still be accepted, you'll still be rewarded, but you're not obligated to perform that Hajj for your lifetime. Let's say you never got the opportunity to perform Hajj, or let's say you had a relative, a father, grandfather, mother, grandmother, they didn't get to perform Hajj, but they had the ability physically and financially. Then it is up to us, if we're able to, either physically or financially, to do it on their behalf. So this is called Hajj Badal. Hajj Badal. It means that you found a substitute to perform Hajj, either on behalf of yourself, because you can't do it physically, maybe you're bedridden, maybe you're paraplegic, you cannot move, and you pay for somebody else to do it. Or you had a deceased relative, and you yourself have too many obligations, you can't go a second time, you've performed your Hajj for your lifetime already, but you just can't go and make the trip, so you pay for somebody else to do it on their behalf. So this is also allowed, because we as children, grandchildren, we have to make sure that we try to take care of that responsibility for our deceased family members that we have responsibility towards, right? If it's like a distant cousin or uncle that isn't part of your immediate family, you're not responsible for them. But if it's your child, your sibling, your spouse, your parents, grandparents, then we have responsibility towards them, and we need to make sure that Hajj is performed on their behalf if they were physically and financially capable at some point in their lives. And this brings up another point. If we are physically and financially capable, then we should try our very best to perform Hajj within that time frame, because we don't know what can happen. We don't know if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away our physical ability. We don't know if He'll take away our financial ability. So we have to make sure that we try to perform Hajj as soon as possible. Some scholars even say that you are sinful for not performing Hajj as soon as you meet the conditions of obligation. Others say that no, you can delay it, but you have to make sure that the delay is not going to take away from your physical and financial ability. You have to have safety, you have to have safe passage free of danger. So this brings me to a certain point, which pains me to say, it breaks my heart, but would you say that our brothers and sisters who are suffering in Gaza, do you think any of them are obligated to perform Hajj this year? No, they don't have safe passage. even if they have the physical and financial means, they don't have safe passage. Now for females, there's two caveats. One is the mahram. What do you do in this case? For a mahram, for a female, there's different opinions, right? And you can split it into three main opinions. One is that you have to have a mahram. It can be a husband, although I don't know if this is a joke, but it sounds kind of funny. I heard one time that scholars recommend that a wife should not go with her husband. Right? Maybe they fight too much. You can think of other reasons too, but it was kind of funny when I heard it. But also, you can go with a brother, you can go with your son, you can go with your father, your grandfather. So whoever is your mahram. Opinion number one is that you need a mahram. Opinion number two is that you do not need a mahram for Hajj. You can go as long as you can ensure that you're in a group, your safety is ensured, your safety of passage while you're there. For instance, like nowadays, you can only go in groups. People don't really go as individuals. Right? It's almost impossible. So if you're going, you're going to be in a group. And if you're going, they say that you can substitute a mahram for a group of reliable women. So even if you have a group of reliable women that get together and say that, hey, we want to go for Hajj, then this is one of the opinions. It's the opinion of the Shafi'is that you can go in a group of reliable women as long as your safety is, you have safety of passage, and you can guarantee that you'll have safety throughout the journey, at least for as much as you can prepare for. There's always unforeseen things that can happen. The third opinion is that you look for a mahram, you try to find a mahram, but if they're unable to for whatever reason, or they just don't want to go, then you can go with a group of women and make sure that your safety is guaranteed. And this is the opinion of the Malikis. The other caveat, I guess it should be said, but if there's a female who is within her iddah, whether it's becoming widowed or divorced, you have to make sure that your iddah period has passed. If Hajj falls within any part of your iddah period, from the traveling to the rites, the rituals, the manasik, then you do not have to go for Hajj. You should not go because you have to observe your iddah. That is more important at that point in time. All right. Next, we have the miqat. This is something that I want to explain so that you have an understanding of what the miqat actually is. For most of us traveling from the States, you're going to have two situations. Number one, you land in Medina first, or you land in Jeddah first. Okay, so I'll go over what to expect of the miqat to be in these two situations. Number one, the miqat refers to the boundary where it becomes necessary for pilgrims to adorn the ihram, and it is impermissible to pass except in the state of ihram. So you have to make your intention from the miqat. Do not pass any miqat without having your intention for umrah or hajj. Those who cross the boundary without having entered into the state of ihram must perform an animal sacrifice as expiation. And I'll go over the expiation when we get to part 4, inshallah. So, if you find yourself having passed the miqat, which I'll explain for you guys what it's going to be, whether you land in Medina first or Jeddah first, if you pass it, even if you did so unknowingly or by mistake, you still have to offer a sacrifice. Okay. So you don't have to move to the next slide yet, but let me go over each situation. If you land in Medina, if your package has you going to Medina first, Medina itself is not a miqat, but there is an area called Dhul Hulayfa, right? It was an area where a tribe lived, and there is a masjid there, and that's a picture of the masjid, right? And they made it very large. There's tons of bathrooms and showers, so people can go there and put on their ihram and shower and pray and do what they need to do in order to get into ihram. You want to make your intention from there, right? Because if you leave the miqat at Dhul Hulayfa and you have not made your intention, you have to give a sacrifice. And this is probably going to happen if you're going to Makkah by bus, right? If you're going to Makkah by bus, you'll probably have to do this. They'll probably stop at Dhul Hulayfa, you get off, you make your intention, you would pray your 2 rak'ahs. I'll go over these steps again later, but you have to make your intention from there. Nowadays, we have the trains. A lot of people go by train. And even some people, they won't go by train or bus, but they'll have a chartered flight that will take them from Medina to Jeddah. So that's another one. Okay, so I'll explain all three. I'll explain those three. Bus, I just explained. You'll probably be at Dhul Hulayfa and you'll make your intention and you'll head straight to Makkah. The next situation in which you'll be passing a miqat is the train. While you're on the train, you have to make sure that you're listening for the announcement. The train is very fast. It will slow down as it's passing the miqat. And it will say that we are passing the miqat, make your intention, we are passing the miqat, and then it'll repeat it over and over again. And as the train is moving slowly, you need to make your intention then. So no matter how tired you are, please do not fall asleep on the train or else you'll miss it. Right? Now, if you're taking a flight from Makkah to Jeddah, then what will happen is that as you're flying, the captain will say on the PA system that we are passing the miqat, we are at the position where we're passing the miqat, make your intention, you need to make your intention there. That's in terms of the miqat. When it comes to making your intention, your niyyah, and getting into ihram, I'll explain all the different situations that do not require the miqat that you can do in case you're scared and you might think that you might miss it. It will be very difficult to miss. They make announcements, or you might even stop and get off the bus. The train slows down. The plane, they'll announce over the PA system. Okay, so it will be very hard to miss. You just have to make sure you're paying attention and that you make your intention. The second situation, if you land in Jeddah first, if you have a package where you go to Medina after, or you don't go at all and you just go straight to Makkah. When you're flying from your whatever flight you have that goes to Jeddah, right? Let's say you're flying Turkish Airlines, Emirates, Qatar, or maybe you have a direct flight through Saudi Airlines that lands directly in Jeddah. You have to make sure that on that flight, you take your ihram with you. So this is for the men, and for the women, you wear whatever you need to wear in order to be in a state of ihram. Because you will need to get into your ihram from the plane. This is very annoying. I haven't had to do this since I was a little kid. I think I've done it once. I haven't done it since. Alhamdulillah. Because can you imagine those airplane bathrooms are really small. They're really inconvenient. So if you're able to get into ihram from your layover, if it's Istanbul or Doha or Dubai or I don't know, New York or DC, then I would recommend that the men do that, right? Because it's not easy. You got to go and change. You got to make sure you pray your 2 sunnah afterwards, or before you make your intention, you pray your 2 sunnah. So you also have to have wudu and all these other things, right? So, but you would have to make your niyyah for ihram from the plane, okay? So just to make that clear. And the pilot, the captain, they'll announce over the PA system that we are approaching Mecca, right? Or you're passing the miqat, or you're approaching Jeddah to make your intention, right? Because there's no miqat in Jeddah, right? You cannot make your intention from Jeddah. You have to make your intention when they announce on the plane that, hey, we're approaching, make your intention. So is that clear? Wa alaikum assalam.
Thank you so much.
Welcome.
My quick question is that, so I'm going from New York to Jeddah.
Yes.
However, I'm going to Medina first. So my package, as soon as we land in Jeddah, will take us to Medina.
Okay.
And the group told us that we don't need to be in Ihram.
You don't. I'm talking about if you go to Mecca first or you don't go to Medina at all.
Okay.
Right? So some people do Medina first, some people do Mecca first. Some people only do Makkah and don't go to Medina at all. So if you're landing in Jeddah but you're going to Medina, you don't have to be in ihram. Good question. Jazakallah khair. Right? So let me repeat that. If you are landing in Jeddah but you're not going to Makkah first, okay? So this means you have two packages, right? Usually Medina first, Makkah first. If you're going to Medina first, doesn't matter where you land. You don't have to get into ihram until you start heading to Makkah. You get into ihram when you start heading to Makkah. So if you're going to Makkah first, you are going to be making your intention for ihram from the plane. So you just have to listen out for the announcement over the PA system. Okay, so next slide. So here's like a little chart of what the days are going to look like. Right? I started off number one with ihram and tawaf because these are things that happen before the official days of the rituals of Hajj. Right? You get into ihram and then you perform your first tawaf and maybe your first sa'i. You can do it at that time or you can do it later. I'll repeat that again. The next portion is the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, and this is not a time where you're actually required to be in ihram, but it's sunnah, it's recommended. It's recommended that you go spend the night in Mina on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, and this is called Yawm at-Tarwiyah. Yawm at-Tarwiyah. And then the next day, you're going to head to Arafah, the 9th of Dhul Hijjah. This is called Yawm al-Arafah, and this is the make or break of Hajj. And I'll go over that later. And then afterwards, you have Yawm al-Nahr, which is the 10th. When you leave Arafah, you spend the night in Muzdalifah, and then the next morning, you go to back to Mina, and you pelt the big jamara, and then you do the sacrifice, cut your hair, and while you all are going to be doing this, the rest of us are going to be celebrating Eid. And then the last few days after the 10th, the 11th, 12th, and if you end up staying the 13th, it's called Ayyam at-Tashriq. Ayyam at-Tashriq. Okay, next slide. So I'm going to go into these now bit by bit. This is still a bit of an overview. It's not like a detail of what your day is going to be like. But you, I mentioned, you go to the miqat, you got to make your ihram, you got to make your intention, be in the state of ihram. Then when you arrive in Makkah, you're going to perform tawaf al-qudum if you're performing, oh subhanAllah. Okay, I guess I missed it somehow. Before I start this, there are 3 types of intention you can make for Hajj. Okay, I didn't put it in here, but for the most part, I believe the majority of people, especially people who come from America, your group, your leader, your sheikh, most likely he's going to tell you to make intention for Hajj at-Tamattu'. Okay, this is one type of intention you make for Hajj. It's called Hajj at-Tamattu' because you go to Makkah and you perform a full Umrah first, and then you can get out of Ihram. So the intention you make for this at the miqat is, I'm making niyyah for Hajj at-Tamattu'. I'm going to perform Umrah first. So your niyyah is technically for Umrah. So once you complete your Umrah, you can cut and shave your head, and you can get out of Ihram until you're ready to go for either on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah or the 9th when you go to Arafah. Okay. Is that clear? You go to Makkah, you perform Umrah first. So whether you're going from Medina or you're landing in Makkah first, you have your first intention for Hajj at-Tamattu' is for Umrah. Right? Now, the other 2 types are a little bit more similar. You have Hajj al-Qiran, which means you're combining the intention for Hajj and Umrah together. So you're performing Hajj and Umrah together, but under one ihram. So when you get to Makkah, you perform your tawaf, you can do your sa'i, but you don't cut your hair, you stay in ihram. The third type is called Hajj al-Ifrad. Ifrad means by itself. You're only performing Hajj, there's no Umrah involved. right? And this is usually what somebody who maybe they live in Makkah, maybe they live in Jeddah, maybe they live in Saudi, and they can perform Umrah all throughout the year whenever they want, and maybe they just want to go and perform just Hajj by itself. So at that point, you have to make intention for only Hajj. I'm only coming to perform Hajj. I'm not making the intention that I'm combining Hajj and Umrah. I'm not making the intention that I'm performing Umrah first and then Hajj. It's only Hajj. You go in your Ihram, you stay in your Ihram, and you don't get out until you perform some of the rituals that you can perform to get out of your Ihram. Okay, so number one, you perform Umrah first, and you get out of your Ihram, then you re-enter Ihram from Makkah, right? Or when you get to Mina, or even when you arrive in Arafah, and you can make your intention for Hajj then, right? So intention number one, or entry into Ihram number one for Umrah. Entry number two is for Hajj, and you can do that either from within Makkah. You don't have to go back to the miqat, okay? Because I know sometimes people think that, okay, if I need to make my intention again, do I have to leave Makkah? Do I have to go to a miqat? Do I have to go to Masjid Aisha? Do I have to do this, that? No. You can make your intention from your hotel in Makkah. You can make your intention from Mina. You can make your intention even when you get to Arafah. Just make sure that you are in the proper attire for Ihram and in the proper state. And then, okay, so that was Tamattu', Qiran. Yes, brother, question? I'll go over Ihram in general and making your niyyah and getting into it. This is only right now about the different intentions for Hajj, right? So if you're performing Qiran, whether you're making your intention, you can make your intention from the plane when you're passing over the miqat, or you make your intention in Medina from the miqat, or wherever it is. Wherever you're going to make your intention from, you make your intention that you're going to do Hajj Qiran, combining Hajj and Umrah, and you only maintain one Ihram throughout. You cannot break your Ihram until you reach the point in Hajj where you perform certain rituals that bring you out of Ihram, and we'll get to that inshallah. And then the third one, Ifrad, only make intention for Hajj, whether from Medina, whether from the airplane in Jeddah, or flying to Jeddah. You have to make your Ihram and intention for Hajj, and you stay in that one Ihram throughout. And for this one intention, for Ifrad, you are not required to have a sacrifice. You do not need a hadi. Right? For Tamattu', for Qiran, you're required to have a sacrifice, which can be a sheep or a goat or a seventh of a cow or a seventh of a camel. Right? These are the sacrifices that you can do for Hajj Tamattu' or Hajj Qiran. If you're going Ifrad, you're not required, you still can, but you're not required to sacrifice a sheep or a goat or partake in a seventh of a cow or a camel. Clear? Okay, alhamdulillah. Okay, getting back to the steps. You've made your ihram, you arrive in Makkah, you go to the Kaaba, you perform your tawaf. If you are performing Umrah, your tawaf will be your tawaf for Umrah, and it can be combined all together for your welcoming tawaf as well, which they call tawaf al-qudum. Right? You don't have to do two Umrahs or two tawafs. You can if you want to. Tawaf you can perform as many times as you want. It's like performing nafil salah. You can once you perform one tawaf, you can do it more times if you want. But the one that you need to do, if you're performing Umrah, you perform your tawaf for your Umrah. If you're performing Qiran or Ifrad, then you perform tawaf al-qudum, which is like the welcome tawaf that you perform for Hajj. And then if you're performing Umrah, you do your sa'i between Safa and Marwa, and then you cut your hair or you shorten it and you get out of Ihram. If you're not performing Umrah, then you can perform sa'i either after Tawaf al-Qudum, or you can delay it for later. You don't have to perform sa'i at this time. That's why I didn't include it here. Sa'i can, if for Ifrad and Qiran, keep in mind, Ifrad and Qiran. If you want to delay your sa'i for after Arafah and Muzdalifah and the Jamara, When you perform your other tawaf towards the end of Hajj, then you can leave it for that time. Then on the 8th, as I mentioned, you go to Mina, which is your camp. And just to kind of set some expectations, when you arrive in Jeddah, it's possible it could be very difficult. I know they've tried to improve their processes and getting people through, but you have to realize that there's only so many workers you can fit in an airport, and they're having to deal with a sudden influx of like 3-4 million people, right? So we have to keep that in mind, on top of the fact that they are already, generally pretty rough, but they're also some of the nicest, sweetest people you'll ever meet. So if you catch them on a bad day, then you have to keep your patience. You have to realize, try to work with them, try to be understanding, have them, work with you, not against you. So the airport, sometimes coming and going, especially leaving, some people say that this is like the last pillar of Hajj, dealing with the Jeddah airport, because it's never been easy. It's always a challenge. It's always a challenge, right? As I mentioned, they've had to deal with, a few million people coming in, and they're having to deal with a few million people leaving. It's not easy whatsoever. And then when you arrive in Makkah, same with the hotels, the staff, everything. Maybe, your room's not ready. Maybe your luggage isn't ready. Maybe you, whatever it is, the staff, they're overworked and overwhelmed, and they don't know, they don't have enough hands to help with everything. We have to keep those things in mind as well, right? As I mentioned, we all want to aim for a Hajj Mabrur that requires us to keep our composure at all times, to be patient, to be understanding. If something goes wrong, we cannot let shaitan get to our heads. We cannot let him think that, man, I paid all these thousands of dollars and I'm having to deal with this. I feel like, this isn't worth the money I paid. Don't think that, right? We cannot think that. We have to realize, once again, we have been privileged to have been allowed to come and perform Hajj. And we have to, number one, maintain our composure to make sure we do not do anything that would ruin our chances of having a Hajj Mabrur. And subhanAllah, Hafsa mentioned, and these are true stories, he mentioned that maybe there was one number that was wrong on the visa, and it prevented them from even getting on the plane. Right? This is actually a true story. It's not an exaggeration. One number was not matching from the visa on their passport to the visa that they have in the system, and the person was not allowed to get on the plane. Right? We have to realize that it's a test. Right? Hajj is part of our test as the creation of Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tests those whom He loves, and Hajj is one of those major tests, right? Imagine Hajj for you is like your SAT or your MCAT or your, what's the test called for law school? The LSATs, right? Imagine it's like that. It's that type of a test. It's that major of a test, right? It's not like your regular weekly quizzes or end of the semester tests or end of the year tests. It's the big one. So we have to make sure that we're prepared and we maintain our patience, our sincerity, and so forth. So you arrive in Mina. Maybe some of you have seen pictures. I remember one of the sisters was saying she saw pictures of the Mina bathrooms, right? Maybe you have the general bathrooms that everybody shares and it's a hole in the ground, which I'll let you guys know right now. I've done the economy Hajj, where you're like far away in like the outskirts of Mina, and like maybe the AC works, maybe it doesn't. The bathroom's a hole in the ground with a shower above, right? There's no cooled water, so the water is going to be hot all the time, right? And then I've also, alhamdulillah, had the chance to be a group leader for some VIP and deluxe Hajjs where they build their own Mina camp from scratch. They build their own bathrooms. You have stalls. You have commodes, actual toilets and sprays and showers and all these things, right? You'll still have your challenges. People still find ways to complain. So just make the most of it, and you will be rewarded immensely. And if anything, it will build tons of character for you, that you went and used a bathroom where you had to wait in line, and everybody is using the same bathroom, and you had to use a hole in the ground. And all these things build character, and Islam and the Prophet ﷺ came to perfect our character. Maybe this is one of those ways, inshallah. So from Mina, you spend the night, you go to Arafah, you spend the day in Arafah. Arafah, you just have to be there for a single moment between Dhuhr and Maghrib, right? That's the bare minimum of Arafah. If you get to Arafah and you step 1 foot inside Arafah between Dhuhr and Maghrib, you have achieved or accomplished or completed your Arafah. But of course, that's not what we want. We're not going for Hajj to complete the bare minimum. We're going to Hajj. One thing I said you have to set your expectations. You also have to set your intention and what you want to get out of your Hajj, right? You don't want to go for Hajj just to get it out of the way. There's no point in doing that, right? And this is a lack of sincerity in our intention. We want to go for Hajj because we want to have a spiritually uplifting and a transformative experience in going for Hajj, where we come back and we are a changed person. We're new, not just as if we were newly born and sinless, but we have a renewed, dedicated devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? I mentioned the quote from Imam al-Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah that a Hajj Mabrur is one in which you come back and you have an aversion from worldly life, right? You come back and you have such a heightened spiritual state that this world stops affecting you, right? You are okay against the vices of this life, the temptations of this life, right? That is the type of transformation that we hope to achieve by going for Hajj. And they say that one of the signs of an accepted Hajj Mabrur, is that you come back changed, that you are able to leave off the sins that were daunting to you before, that you were struggling with before. Even if it's just one, even if you're able to just leave off one sin, that you were able to give it up, and you were able to even replace it with something good. So we're not angels. We all struggle with our own demons, shayateen, our own sins that weigh us down. And maybe through an accepted Hajj, we come back and we're able to leave off one, if not all. And we pray that we're able to get rid of all of them. But we leave off at least one, and we leave it off for good, and it doesn't even affect us anymore. And we even replace it with something good, maybe reading more Quran, praying more Salah, coming to the masjid more, reading more Quran, whatever it may be. This is one of the signs of a Hajj Mabrur. So if you come back from Hajj and you feel the same, and you feel like you go back into your same old routine, and you're still struggling with the same things, and you're not feeling that renewed devotion and commitment and energy towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then I hope this doesn't happen for any of you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you all a Hajj Mabrur. But if you feel yourself in that situation where you feel like nothing's changed, then maybe you need to make plans to go back for Hajj again, at least for Umrah, until you can go back for Hajj. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi man wala, ma ba'd. So to continue, we stopped at Mina and Arafah. Okay, as I mentioned, this is just kind of the briefest of overviews, just to give you an idea of what your overall Hajj will look like. Mentioned, you get into Ihram, you get to Mecca, you perform your Tawaf. If you want to perform your Sa'i then you do so. If you're performing Hajj only, or Hajj Qiran, which is Umrah and Hajj combined. If you're performing Umrah only, then you perform your Tawaf, your Sa'i, then you cut your hair, you get out of Ihram. Then you go to Mina. Yes?
How would you choose between Qiran or Tamattu?
So some scholars have given a preferred intention. So for instance, for ifrad, that's usually recommended if you live in Makkah or nearby. Some of the scholars would prefer it for those people, like the locals, basically. Let me find the correct. Okay, each madhab has its own preference as well. Here we go. So I'll just say this in its very basic form and we'll move on from that because I don't want to get into like madhab opinions and stuff. But the Hanafis say that qiran is best and then tamattu' would be superior to ifrad. Then the Shafi'is believe that ifrad is the best while tamattu' is superior to qiran. The Maliki say ifrad is the best and the Hanbali say tamattu' is the best. Now, as I mentioned, most people nowadays, your group leaders, your Hajj package leaders, they'll recommend that you just do tamattu' because you may not travel there all the time. You don't know when you'll be able to perform Umrah and a Hajj instead of just having it combined, right? So they might even tell you that, hey, we're going to be doing tamattu', right? That's usually like the default that majority of a lot of at least Hajj packages that I've been a part of, that they would do.
Is the ruling for Qurbani the same for the two?
As I mentioned, for ifrad, you don't need a sacrifice, but for tamattu' and qiran, you do. So, you perform your tawaf. If you're only performing Hajj or qiran, if you're doing ifrad or qiran, then you can perform your sa'i at that time, or you can delay it until after you perform your tawaf al-ifada, also known as tawaf al-ziyarah, and we'll get to that in a second. Then you go to Mina on the 8th. It's sunnah or recommended to spend the night in Mina on the 8th. You don't have to, but if you do, then you're following a sunnah, which is always best. Then on the 9th, you go to Arafah. I mentioned Arafah, the time period to be in Arafah is any time between Dhuhr and Maghrib. If you step foot onto the plain of Arafah at any point in time between Dhuhr and Maghrib, you have completed your task of being at Arafah. Then you leave Arafah after Maghrib, right? It's recommended to leave after Maghrib. You don't have to pray Maghrib at Arafah. You can combine and pray Maghrib and Isha and Muzdalifah if you so choose to. But you want to head towards Muzdalifah. Yes.
Quick question. So when you're saying we're going from one place to the other, can you also describe if we're taking buses or walking? In what situation we have? What options do we have?
Okay, so I'll give a quick disclaimer. Everything I'm explaining is purely from a ritualistic standpoint. All of those details are totally dependent on your package. So I'll give you guys an idea. I mentioned that you may go to Medina first. You may go to Makkah first. You may go from Medina to Makkah by bus or by plane or by train, right? All three of those options are there. You may be traveling in between the masha'ir or the Hajj sites by train. There's a train. You may be going by bus. Some people go by foot, right? When I first started attending the university, mashallah, they have a program that's sponsored by the Rajhi group. I don't know if you know anything about them, but Shaykh Al-Rajhi, he's a sheikh because he's like a billionaire, right? He owns a Rajhi bank, but he has a waqf or an endowment that is made to take people for Hajj that have never been before, right? So he also sponsors university students from the Islamic University in Medina to also go. So I applied and I went, alhamdulillah. Wasn't officially my first year or second year there, but I went. But it's not like it's some deluxe VIP package. Everything was basic, but alhamdulillah, it was an amazing experience. But one thing I did have to do was to walk from Arafah all the way back to Mina. You walk from Arafah to Muzdalifah, and you walk from Muzdalifah to Mina. I had blisters on my feet because I didn't have the proper slippers. I didn't know I'd be walking that much. right? So I couldn't wait to get out of ihram. The moment I got out of ihram, I ran outside my tent and I looked for, there'll be people in Mina. They're not there to perform Hajj, but they'll have like their little blankets out and they'll be selling anything. No, you name it, they'll be selling like all sorts of random stuff. I found the first one that was selling socks, because I didn't pack any socks with me either. And then I put on those socks and those blisters were really bad. But you might be walking, you might be going by bus, you might be going by train. You have to contact your Hajj group or whoever the US or Western representative is that's in charge of the logistics, and ask them, and they'll let you know your options. Also, here's one thing. Me personally, the groups that I've worked for, I've mainly worked for one group. I've worked for another one before as well. But I know that most groups, they'll have seminars throughout your time having registered with them for Hajj, and they go over all of these things, right? They've been doing this for years, for decades even. They know every in and out of performing Hajj. Maybe this new system is something they have to kind of get used to, but even then they'll have a lot of these things down, right? I know the whole nusuk application process, all that stuff can be super confusing and whatnot, but the logistics of it all, they all have it down, and they have these seminars to keep you up to date and informed and to set your expectations. So if they do have them, they probably have recordings. Ask for them, watch them, and you'll know what you'll be doing at that point, inshallah. So when you leave Arafah, you'll go to Muzdalifah, whether by train or bus or by foot. Muzdalifah is where you'll usually be spending the night. You're supposed to stay until Fajr, unless you have a valid reason to leave halfway through the night. Valid reason would be if you're sick, or if you're elderly, or even females are allowed to leave halfway through the night. They don't need to stay the whole night. It's much easier, it's less traffic, less crowd. And in Muzdalifah, you're not staying in any buildings, right? You're basically camping out under the night sky. And in Muzdalifah, that's also where you should collect your pebbles. You don't have to collect all of them, but it's always good to just go ahead and collect all of them. You're going to collect your pebbles that you're going to be using to stone the Jamara. And I'll go into more details about that after we go over this brief overview. Once you leave Muzdalifah, either it's halfway through the night or after Fajr. Yes? It's still the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah. So you spend the night of Arafah in Muzdalifah. So between 9 and 10, right? So day 9, 9th of Dhul Hijjah is Arafah. It's technically the 10th because it's after Maghrib, but it's whatever is between the 9th day and the 10th day. That's the time you spend in Muzdalifah. Okay. So when you get back to Mina, before you get to your camp, yes.
So whenever we are collecting the pebbles from Muzdalifah, does it have to be from Muzdalifah, or can it be from?
I'll go over those details. I'm just kind of giving you a brief idea first, and then I'll fill in the blanks and fill in some more info. You go and do Rami. I chose a cannon. I don't know. Some people they launch rocks, or maybe you've seen pictures. One guy had a slingshot. One guy's like winding up and he's spinning around in circles and like a discus throw. And some people they think they're pelting shaitan, like he's being trapped in those pillars, and you're actually pelting him. It's really just more for significance, not that you're actually pelting him. It seems like shaitan tricks them into acting like this, making them think he's being pelted with stones. You see all sorts of things. People throwing their slippers, hitting it with their canes. And it was even crazier before they built the current structure. Because back then, I think it was up until maybe the early 2000s, they had the old structure where it was just like a big pillar and it was only 2 stories. And you could go up to it. You could go up to it and you would be able to reach the pillar. Now it's too far away, but you'd be able to reach the pillar. People were hitting it with their walking sticks and smacking it with their chappals. And people I saw with my own eyes, there were people probably in the off season, but I saw names carved into the pillars. It's like, what are you doing? But you go for Rami, you only stone the big Jamara. It's called Jamaratul Aqaba. It's the big one. It's the third one, which is closest in the direction of the Qibla. And then when you get back to Mina, I'll go over this again. According to the Hanafi madhab, there is an order in which you're supposed to do the next steps. The other madahib, there's no order, okay? So either you have no order, but if you do have an order, I'll go over it. The order is that you stone the jamaratul aqaba, only the big one. Then you wait until your sacrifice is done. Remember, this is according to the Hanafi madhab. You wait until your sacrifice is done, and then you can cut or shave your head. Okay, that's the order. And then after that, if you're Hanafi, you can get out of your ihram, right? And this is stage one of getting out of your ihram. For Hajj, there's two stages of getting out of your ihram. There's the primary stage in which you can do everything except intercourse with your spouse. And then there's the final stage in which everything becomes halal again. Okay, is that clear? So for stage one, if you're Hanafi, you have to follow this order. Rami, then the sacrifice, then you cut your hair or you shave your head. Okay, and then for women, I'll go over what they're supposed to do. After you follow this, you can get out of your ihram, you can put on, use scented deodorant again, you don't have to be musty anymore, you can take a bath with any scented soap or shampoo that you want, wear your regular clothes, you'll be fine. And it's after this order. If you're not Hanafi and you don't need an order, then what you have to do is that you have to fulfill 3 out of 4. Rami or stoning the Jamratul Aqaba, sacrifice, shaving or cutting your head, Tawaf al-Ifada or Tawaf al-Ziyarah. If you do any of those 3 in any particular order, the order doesn't matter, then you can get out of your ihram. So if you do Rami and then you cut your hair and you do Tawaf, but your sacrifice still hasn't been done, if you're not Hanafi, you can get out of ihram, right? If you do sacrifice and cut your hair and Tawaf, you can get out of ihram. If you do Rami and Tawaf and sacrifice, but you haven't cut your hair, you can get out of ihram. Okay, so Hanafi, there's a particular order, and it's in this order here, 1, 2, 3, from the top right to the bottom left to the bottom right. And then if you're not Hanafi, you can do any order. And next slide, there's Tawaf al-Ifada, also known as Tawaf al-Ziyarah. This is your Tawaf of Hajj. Okay, this is the Tawaf of Hajj, right? You have to do this Tawaf. And if you didn't do your Sa'i for Hajj before, then you have to do it now. Okay? If you didn't do your Sa'i of Hajj before, you have to do it now. If you were Tamattu' and you did Sa'i for Umrah, then you should do Sa'i again here after you perform your Tawaf al-Ifada, also known as Tawaf al-Ziyarah. Then for the next 3 days, 11th, 12th, and if you stay for the 13th, then for the 13th, you have to stone all 3 of the Jamara, right? Small, medium, big. They're all the same size, they're not different sizes, they're just called small, medium, and big, okay? And it starts from, and they have a flow of traffic. You're not going to get confused or lost. If you do, then you did something wrong, right? The flow of traffic will take you from the smallest to the largest. And it's farthest from the Qibla to the nearest, okay? It'll say Qibla in this direction, and you'll see the pillars, and you start from the farthest and you go towards the direction of the Qibla. And I'll go over what you're supposed to do and what you can say. There's no, a lot of these things don't have any required du'as or statements. A lot of it is just sunnah and recommended. Okay. After you do your Rami and let's say you're ready to leave Mina, you can leave on the 12th, you can leave if you stay for the 13th, then you should do Rami and then leave. Right? Because it mentions in the Quran, وَاذْكُرُوا اللَّهَ فِي أَيَّامٍ مَعْدُودَاتٍ فَمَنْ تَعَجَّلَ فِي يَوْمَيْنِ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ وَمَنْ تَأَخَّرَ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. So when you're in Hajj and you count the days, there's a certain number of days. If you want to leave after 2 days, you can. And if you want to delay an extra day, you can. There's no problem taking either choice. Of course, it's better to stay an extra day. You can do an extra Rami, more chance to make dua and these things. And when you're ready to leave Mina and you're ready to leave Makkah, you have to perform Tawaf al-Wida. That's your farewell Tawaf. It should be the last thing you do in Makkah before you leave and you're ready to depart. Brother, you have a question in the back?
Yeah, so when you're away from
Yeah, so some packages will allow you to keep your hotel throughout your stay in Hajj. Some packages put you in a neighborhood called Aziziyah, where there's a lot of, I guess not like apartment buildings, but like buildings that have rooms in them, and they'll let you stay there. So for Mina, for your day in Mina to count, you have to spend at least half the night there. So if you've spent half the night, and then, or if you spend the whole night, and then it's the next day, and you're walking or you're driving for tawaf, to go for tawaf al-ziyarah or tawaf al-ifada, or even tawaf al-wida, and you feel the need to stop in your room, you can stop in your room. There's no problem with that, as long as you spend the night in Mina, at least half the night. So then you perform your tawaf al-wida, and then maybe you leave Makkah, you go back home, or you go to Medina, and we'll go over that stuff next, inshallah. Okay, next slide. Okay, first the sister and then the brother. I'll go over that. Yeah, that was just a brief overview of the main rituals that you'll be performing of Hajj. I'll start filling in the details day by day, inshallah. So here's just another like flow chart. It shows, you arrive. Sorry, brother. Yes, your question.
Tawaf al-ifada or tawaf al-wida, they're just tawafs.
They're just tawafs.
No saying.
So I mentioned when you perform tawaf al-ifada, if you're performing qiran or ifrad, okay, if you're performing only Hajj or combined Umrah and Hajj, if you didn't perform your sa'i for Hajj the first time, when you first arrived in Makkah, then you have to perform it then. So you can see here, like when you're day one, when you arrive in Makkah, you perform tawaf, you can perform sa'i. The scholars mention that it's more recommended to delay your sa'i for tawaf al-ifada, tawaf al-ziyarah. So tawaf al-ifada and tawaf al-ziyarah is the same thing, just different names. So scholars recommend to delay your sa'i for that. If you're performing umrah, you have to do your sa'i because you have to complete your umrah. And then you perform your sa'i for Hajj after tawaf al-ifada or tawaf al-ziyarah. Right, day 2, which is the 8th of Dhul Hijjah, depart for Mina. Then you spend the day of the 9th in Arafah. You stay overnight in Muzdalifah. Then the 10th day is the first day of Eid for us that will be here, and it's called Yawmun Nahar, where you go, you stone the big jamara, and you have your sacrifice, cut your hair, go for tawaf and sa'i. Then the next few days, again, you stone the jamarat, all 3 of them this time, and you perform your farewell tawaf, and you leave Makkah. Okay, next slide. So these steps I'm going to go through is going to explain Umrah, but you need to know this for Hajj as well, right? Because Hajj, you do everything you do in Umrah, right? So I have to go over Umrah anyways. I'm going to go over Umrah, and you just apply all of this to your Hajj as well. If there's anything different, then I'll point it out. So for Ihram, which is the main thing I mentioned, it has to be before you reach the miqat. I'll go over into some caveats, and I'll do this quickly because I also want to give you all time for Q&A, and Isha Jama'ah is at 9:45. I don't want to delay it if I don't have to. And of course, if the masjid is okay with, if they want to start on time, I understand. If they're okay delaying it a few minutes, then I would appreciate that as well. And we'll see how the time goes. You have to, it's sunnah to make sure you're clean. You want to make sure that you have ritual purity, of course, that you're not, in a state of janaba. So if you need to do ghusl, you do your ghusl. It's recommended, it's sunnah to do ghusl for ihram itself, right? So to get into ihram, it's sunnah to do a ghusl. At the very least, make wudu before you get into ihram. And it's sunnah to clip your nails, remove any unwanted hair under the armpits or in the pubic areas. And for men, it's sunnah to trim your mustache before you enter into ihram. Do not think that it's fard, right? Too many times people, they'll take something that is sunnah and they'll apply it as fard, and then they'll make things harder for themselves. This happened to me before. My parents thought something was fard that I didn't do, even though it was sunnah. They made me hop in a taxi. And how old was I? I was like 15 years old. They made me hop in a taxi, go to Masjid Aisha, get into ihram again, come back, perform another umrah. I mean, there's no complaints. You're performing another umrah. But for me to think that I had to do this because I messed up my first umrah, it wasn't true, right? So if you didn't cut your nails, if you didn't remove any axillary hair from your axillary areas, your pubic areas, you're still fine. it's fine. You don't have to do all that. You didn't trim your mustache, you're okay. So do ghusl, at very least make wudu. Now, ihram, some people think it's just the clothing you wear. Ihram is a spiritual state. It's a state that you make the intention to enter into. It's called ihram because it comes from haram, because once you enter that state, there are a few things that are normally halal that become totally haram once you enter that state. So the clothing, before you reach the miqat, you should put on your ihram. Usually you'll be told to do this from your hotel room, and not, bother yourself to do it either at the miqat itself or in the airplane bathroom or anything like that. Right? Don't make things difficult for yourself. Get into your ihram when you can do it comfortably. If you're at the airport, you can just go to like a family restroom, or ask a buddy to get you lounge access or something. Just find a good place to go and change so that you're comfortable once you're in ihram. And if you're in Medina, then just do it from your hotel room. Don't make things difficult on yourself. Your Hajj group will probably tell you to do it from your hotel room anyways. For men, it's 2 sheets of white cloth. You have the izar and you have the rida. And it's okay. And then for women, it's just regular modest clothing. You don't have to wear any particular color. Even for ihram, it doesn't have to be white, but it's recommended to wear white. For women as well, it's any modest clothing will suffice. You'll usually see women, they're usually wearing like their cultural clothing that's modest, or an abaya or something like that. As long as you're not, for women, as long as you're not covering your hands and your face. Then, before you make your intention for ihram, it's recommended to pray 2 sunnah. You don't have to do it at the miqat. The sunnah was, and I say sunnah because this is what the Prophet ﷺ had available to him. There weren't airplanes, there weren't trains, who knows what would have been done in that situation. The Prophet ﷺ left his home, got on his ride, went to the miqat of Dhul Hulayfa, dismounted, prayed 2 sunnah, and after he made his salam, he made his intention for ihram. So you pray your 2 sunnah and you make your intention for ihram after you complete your 2 sunnah. If you do this from your hotel room, it's okay. If you do this from Masjid al-Nabawi, it's okay. If you want to do this from the airport, it's okay. If you want to do it on the airplane, that'll probably be your last chance, right? But if you want to be comfortable, you can do it from the hotel. You can in Medina. You can do it from the airport, wherever your layover is, right? You don't, like I said, don't make things difficult for yourself if you don't have to. You can make your intention as soon as you finish your sunnah, or you pray your sunnah and you wait till you are about to pass the miqat and you can make your intention. Then it's fine either way. It's recommended to read Surah Al-Kafirun in the first rak'ah, Surah Al-Ikhlas in the second rak'ah. Yes? The salah is before you make your intention. So if you're not in your ihram yet and you pray the 2 sunnah, it's still okay, but I would just say that because you want to make your intention with the prayer, then you should get into your ihram, pray the 2 sunnah, and as soon as you do your salam, you make the intention. If you want to follow the sunnah as closely as possible, right? And you'll see a lot that in a lot of the sunnahs of the Prophet ﷺ in which he prayed 2 rak'ahs, you will usually see that the first rak'ah was Kafirun, second rak'ah is Surah Al-Ikhlas. The same is for after you perform tawaf, the same is for the 2 sunnah of Fajr. You'll see that the Prophet ﷺ used to recite these 2 surahs often in his sunnah prayers. Then you make your niyyah. You can say Labbaik Allahumma Umratan if you're performing Umrah. You say Hajjan if you're performing Hajj. Or you can say that I'm going to perform Umrah and Hajj combined, Hajj Qiran. Or you can say, so this is very important, especially for women, because a lot of times, it's important. You want to plan your going for Hajj and make sure you prepare, especially if you think you're going to get your menses while you're traveling, right? This is a problem, an issue that comes up a lot. It's a woman's issue. Of course, men don't have to worry about this, but it's best to plan ahead and make sure that are you going to be able to get into ihram? Are you going to be able to perform all of the rites and rituals of Hajj? And what steps can you take to make sure you're able to? I am not a medical professional. I just happen to be the son of one. But I know that, you know, sometimes women, they might take like some medicine that will delay their period or their menses, and you just need to get an expert opinion on that before deciding to do so. That's my advice, because you don't want to do anything that's going to harm you as well. You just want to make sure that you're able to perform your Hajj, right? And of course, for the women, you know best what your cycle is, and you know when to expect it if it's regular. And just make sure you take the necessary steps, because too many times, you know, women will come for Umrah and they did not perform their Umrah at all because they were on their menses the entire time. Maybe they come for Hajj and they had to miss out on a lot of the rituals because they were on their menses. There is a fatwa which I prescribe by, that if you're on your menses and you have to perform your Tawaf al-Ifada and your Tawaf al-Wida, you combine the two, because you can do that. You combine the two, you perform one Tawaf with the intention of performing both. Even if you're on your menses, you just have to make sure that you are in a sanitary state in which nothing will leak out or no blood will get on the masjid, and that is acceptable. There is a fatwa for that. So that, because once you leave, it's very difficult to come back, and nobody is going to tell you that, hey, like, the government's not going to be like, oh, you didn't perform your tawaf, okay, we'll let you come back in a few days, or we'll let you come back in a week. No, it's very difficult. You have to go home, you have a plane ticket, you cannot afford to stay any longer. So in that situation, the fatwa is that for the women, just shower and make sure you're clean and sanitary and that nothing will come out, and go and perform your tawaf. Right? So that's usually a big issue that comes up, and a question that comes up very, very often. So hopefully nobody asks that in the Q&A session. But let's get through this quickly. You say, oh Allah, I'm here to perform Umrah, or oh Allah, I'm here to perform Hajj. You don't have to say it out loud. You can say it within your heart. If you can't say the Arabic, you can say it in whatever language you're comfortable saying it in. But then you should recite the talbiyah. I'm sure you've all heard it before. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. Inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk la sharika lak. And the translation is up there, you can read that. The men should say it out loud, the women don't have to. The men should say it out loud when they're going up a hill, down a hill, passing somebody, right? You should just try and say it as much as you can. Don't lose your voice saying it, but try to say it as much as you can. If you need a break, take a break, but try to say it audibly as much as you can, up until you arrive at the Kaaba and you're about to perform your tawaf. Then you get to Mecca. You know, you're going to get off at your hotel, you're going to maybe want to wash up. You're allowed to take off your ihram, just don't put anything else on. For men, if you feel the need that you want to just, you know, wash up, maybe you got sweaty, whatever, you just want to be fresh, you want to make wudu, whatever it is, just make sure that you don't put anything else on. You can take your ihram off, okay? Women, same. You can even change into a fresh ihram. Women, you can change into a fresh set of clothing, right? You can do that. People think that, oh, I put on my ihram, if I take it off, it's like it's going to break my ihram. No, that's not the case. So when you get to your hotel, you know, just focus on going to the Kaaba. Don't ruin your mood if something goes wrong in the hotel, right? You're there, maybe you're seeing the Kaaba for the first time. Just don't sour the mood. You're in control of your reaction, right? You can't control the actions of others, but you can control your own reaction. Try to stay patient, try to stay calm, recite the talbiyah, remind yourself you're there for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you head to Al-Masjid Al-Haram, you enter with your right foot, you recite the dua. If you want to, you know, if you need to pray any of the salawat, Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, whichever prayer you get there for, you can pray those, and then you go and perform your tawaf. So on the next slide, you have the Tawaf al-Umrah. Tawaf al-Umrah will apply to all of the other Tawafs. Tawaf al-Umrah applies the same to all the other Tawafs, except Tawaf al-Ifada and Tawaf al-Ziyara, Tawaf al-Wida'. most likely you're going to be out of your ihram. Okay, so you don't have to worry about uncovering your shoulder and ihram or any of those things. But for tawaf al-umrah, tawaf al-qudum, or if you're still in your ihram and you go and perform tawaf al-ifada, this will apply. You have to do ibtida, which is uncovering your right shoulder for the men. So you just take your ihram, if it's over both shoulders, just take one part and put it under your right arm and you drape your left shoulder. You do this for the duration of your tawaf. The starting point is the black stone. If you cannot see the black stone, you'll see green lights to your right. Tawaf is counterclockwise. The Kaaba will always be on your left hand side. Starts at the black stone, ends at the black stone. Each time you pass the black stone, that's one circuit. Your niyyah for tawaf, you don't have to make a particular niyyah, but you can say that I'm performing tawaf of the sacred mosque, so accept it from me and make it easy for me. You can kiss the black stone. If you don't, it's not part of your tawaf. This is something extra. Even Umar radiallahu anh, he said, pointing at the black stone, he said that if I did not see the Prophet ﷺ kissing you, I would not have done so. He's like, I know you're just a stone. Right? It's not, you don't have to do it. It's very difficult to do it. Don't kill yourself trying to do it. Men, like you might try and go in and you might lose your bottom ihram. Right? You don't want something like that to happen. And it happens. It happens. So, if you cannot kiss it, you can just put your hands towards it from afar. And because you're passing the black stone each tawaf, it's enough that you can just, kiss it from far away by gesturing towards it. And every time you pass the black stone, you raise your hands and you say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. But please, for the sake of my sanity, because I hate it when people do this, don't stop and do it. There are thousands of people behind you that are also performing tawaf. If you stop, it's going to jam up the whole thing. You'll see people stopping, try to go around them. Don't stop. You can slow down and say Bismillah Allahu Akbar, facing the black stone. So you do this every time you pass the black stone, even on the end of the seventh one. Okay, so let's say you're completing your tawaf. So you're going to say Bismillah Allahu Akbar towards the black stone a total of 8 times to complete 7 circuits of tawaf. So you start for men. If there's room to do so during Hajj, I highly doubt it. Actually, I'm like 99.9 infinity% sure that you're not going to be able to walk briskly. Okay, this is called raml. You're not going to be able to do this. It's going to be too crowded. If anything, even if you stopped walking and you just kind of lean back, the crowd might just carry you, right? You might end up crowd surfing to a certain extent. So there's not going to be any room to do this. Dhikr and dua, you can make any dhikr and dua that you want. You can recite Quran, you can make any du'as, do tasbih, do takbir, tahmeed, tahleel, whatever you want. The only recommended dua is from the last corner to the black stone. The last corner is called Ar-Rukn al-Yamani. It's the corner that faces Yemen, and it's the only corner that's exposed. It's not covered by the cloth, and it's the only corner that is from the original foundation of the Kaaba that Ibrahim a.s. built. So, from there to the black stone, it's recommended to recite which dua? رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. If you forget, you'll be reminded because you'll have thousands of people saying it around you, right? So you can recite it until you get to the black stone, and from then on, you can just recite any dua that you want, any adhkar, any Quran that you want to read. And as I mentioned, when you finish your last circuit, you get to the black stone, you should still say Bismillah Allahu Akbar. Okay, quickly, next slide. You cover your right shoulder for the men, and then you pray 2 rak'ahs. You need to make sure, and again, this probably won't be an issue because it'll be so crowded, but you pray 2 rak'ahs and you have to make sure it's behind Maqam Ibrahim. If you can't pray directly behind it, draw an imaginary circle from the Maqam Ibrahim all the way around back to the Maqam, and you can pray anywhere behind that circle. Okay. First rak'ah, you should recite Surah Al-Kafirun. Second rak'ah, you should recite Surah Al-Ikhlas. And that's it. Then you go and perform your sa'i, which is from Safa to Marwa. There is some recommended things to do when the Prophet ﷺ used to go towards sa'i. Safa and Marwa, he used to say, Inna as-Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. It's an ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah. The dua there's no specific dua. You can do your takbir, you can say Allahu Akbar, La ilaha illallah. The Prophet ﷺ used to recite La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, lahul mulku lahul hamd wa huwa ala kulli shay'in qadir. There's a longer version, you can recite other versions of it. The Prophet ﷺ used to recite dua for a very long time while on Safa and Marwa. He used to make dua for a long time on the two mountains, and he used to make dua for a long time after pelting the jamara. Okay? And as you're going back and forth, you'll see green lights. You're supposed to run on these green lights. How fast do you need to run? Do you have to do a full sprint? No. They say that the way that is to be ran is that you run enough to where you are lifting your feet and knees up, right? So you don't have to run full sprint. You can power walk, you can jog, and just make sure that you're running. It's going to be super crowded, so if you can't, it's not a big deal. Women are not supposed to run. You continue to walk normally. Dhikr and dua, same as tawaf. You can read whatever you want in between the mountains and even on the mountains. You make whatever dua you want. Now, it's important to remember, if you've never been before, it's your first time, one direction counts as one. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Safa to Marwa is 1. So anytime you go Safa to Marwa, it's an odd number. Anytime you go Marwa to Safa, it's an even number. Now, for Tawaf and Sa'i, what if you forget what number you're on? For Tawaf, you go with the lower number. It's like Salah. You go with the lower number. If you don't remember what rak'ah you're on, you go with the lower number. Because if you pray an extra, it's just an extra, it doesn't count. At least you completed your Salah and you didn't miss anything. That's the important part. Sa'i, it's a little bit harder to forget which one you're on unless you're just really not paying attention. Because if you're going towards Marwa, you're like, okay, it's an odd number, it's either 1, 3, 5, or 7. If you're going towards Safa, then it has to be an even number, so you should be able to remember at least that much. And another important thing I want to point out, for Tawaf, whether you're in Ihram or not, Tawaf is like Salah, so that means you have to have wudu. You have to have wudu. If you break your wudu, stop your Tawaf, go make wudu, come back. If you need, for whatever reason, like I mentioned, if you break to drink a glass of water, if you break to go make wudu, you continue your Tawaf from where you left off. Okay, you don't have to start Tawaf all over again. Right? It's like Salah. If you break your wudu, you go, make your wudu, and you come back and you continue your Salah where you left off. You don't have to start over again. If you take a long break, if you have to break your Tawaf, then you have to go back to your hotel room, then you take a nap or whatever it is, that you have to start your Tawaf over again. Right? Sa'i, same thing. You don't want to take a long break. There's no need, but you don't have to have wudu for Sa'i. If you don't have wudu, you can perform your Sa'i just fine. But of course, it's always best to be in a state of wudu. You're going to be reciting Quran, reciting the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Try and keep your wudu. If you break it, there's Zamzam fountains and barrels, and there's wudu stations and whatnot. You can go and do that and come back and continue. Okay, next slide. I just posted the dua the Prophet ﷺ used to make. You can do a longer version. There's La ilaha illallah wahda, nasara abda, wa azza jundahu, wa hazama al-ahzaba wahda. You can recite all of those, the full version that maybe you've heard before. And that's what's recommended at each mountain. Next slide. Now for men, you have halq or taqsir. Halq is completely shaving, taqsir is shortening. So you're going to exit the masjid, there's barbershops everywhere, there's actually scouts that look for people because they're all competing, all the barbershops are competing against each other. They will literally grab you by your hand and say that you're coming with me, and they'll take you to the barbershops. And I've seen scouts even fight with each other, right? Because they're like, no, he's with me, no, he's with me, no, he's with me. They're all the same, they all pretty much cost the same. They just, they're trying to earn some money. So you can exit, you go, you don't even have to go to a barber shop. You can do it yourself, somebody else can do it for you, it's not a big deal. For men, you can completely shave your head. This is halq, it's more recommended by the Prophet ﷺ because he made dua for the one who shaves his head. He says, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the one who shaves his head completely bald, right? And then the companion said, what about the one who shortens his hair? And then the Prophet ﷺ repeated another 2 times. So a total of 3 times. The Prophet ﷺ said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the one who shaves his head. And then on the 4th time he said, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive the one who shortens his hair. So it's always better to go bald. If you go bald or you're already bald, then the next time you need to cut your hair after you get into ihram, or if you didn't perform umrah and you're cutting your hair and you're already bald, what you do is you just run a blade, so you can just take a razor for yourself. So this is one advantage that the bald men have over the men with hair. You can just take that blade and just run it over your bald head, and that counts. Because there's no hair to cut, but you still have to do it. Women, you just have to trim just like a finger, the tip of your finger. That's the minimum amount, right? So just that much. And what the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, what they used to do, they used to tie their hair in a single braid, so that when it was time to cut, they could just, take their braid and just cut a little bit off, and it would be fine. And like I said, you don't have to worry about barbershops. There's a ton, especially under the clock tower, maybe some outside as well. It's fine with that. So then we'll get into the overview of Hajj, and I want to do this quickly so that we can go over everything else. And if you have any questions, which I hope maybe you don't, because I'm hoping to go over this pretty thoroughly. So we mentioned it takes over, it goes over 5 days from the 8th until the 13th, or at least the 12th. And on the 8th, it's known as Yawm Tarwiyah, the day of drinking. That's the day you can go to Mina and spend the night. If you don't, your Hajj is fine, don't worry about it. And you can get into Ihram from there, and you go to Arafah the next day. When you go to Arafah the next day, it's known as Yawm al-Arafah. I mentioned, people normally go after Fajr prayer, and they usually try to get there before Dhuhr, right? This is what you should try to do. If you don't, it's okay. The minimum amount of completing Arafah is what? As long as you step foot in the plain of Arafah between Dhuhr and Maghrib. Now, this I mentioned is the make or break of Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajju Arafah. Hajj is Arafah. It is the one pillar of Hajj. I said pillar, right? Not obligation. Pillar of Hajj that is dependent upon time and place. So if you are in the wrong place, or if you do not make it in time, your Hajj is not valid, and you have to repeat it, and you can only do so by performing Hajj and making the day of Arafah in a future time, if not the following year if you're unable to. So if you miss Arafah for whatever reason, that's it. There's no making it up. Tawaful Wida', you can go back and do it. Jamarat, you can go back and do it, right? You can do your expiation, and you go and you perform it. But Arafah, that's it. You miss it, khalas, there's no Hajj for you. That's why it's very important. And Arafah is also, and there's a reason why. Because Arafah itself, it's the day in which everybody is in the same place at the same time. They're all wearing the same thing, and they're all there to do one thing and one thing only. And that is to worship Allah. Everybody is there for one reason. Same place, same time, same purpose. Right? Which is why you have the hadith in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's boasting to the angels, because He frees more servants from the hellfire on this day, and He's boasting to them and asking the servants, what is it that you want? Meaning, like, ask me of anything, I will grant it to you. What is it that you want, my servants? So the Prophet ﷺ, he used to perform Dhuhr and Asr together at the time of Dhuhr. And there's a wisdom behind this, it makes sense. One adhan, 2 iqamas, Dhuhr and Asr combined together, because then, once you're done praying, there is nothing to stop you from just making dua the rest of the day, which should be everybody's focus. Everybody's focus should be to make dua for that entire time until Maghrib comes. Right? Make sure you get enough rest, make sure you're properly hydrated, make sure whatever it is that you need to do, that you do it, in order for nothing to deter you from making dua between Dhuhr Asr prayed together and Maghrib. So basically from Dhuhr to Maghrib, you want to make as much dua as you possibly can, The best du'as are the most general one, but at this time, you should ask for anything and everything that you can think of. Hafsa mentioned that you should write it down, make a list, think of everybody that's important to you in your life. Make dua for all of the Muslims, past and present and future, around the world. Especially, it's been, I can't even remember a year in which something was not going on with our brothers and sisters around the world. Somewhere in the Muslim world, there's something wrong going on. They're suffering, facing injustice, being killed, being imprisoned, whatever it is. They need our du'as, and during that time, we should make dua for everything. And you can make your list. You can look up du'as that the Prophet ﷺ made, du'as from the Sunnah, du'as from the Quran. All of the hadith have du'as in them. We should look up all of them and then also make our own personal du'as. The best du'as are, of course, the ones we find in the Quran, the du'as we find in the Sunnah, but that doesn't mean we cannot make more du'a than that, because if you think about it, if you think about our time here, Dhuhr starts, let's say 1:30 to keep it round, and Maghrib is 8:15, okay? That's almost 7 hours, right? In those 7 hours, you can make, is my math right? I think it's right. You can make all of the du'as from the Quran, all of the du'as from the Sunnah, and your own du'as, probably like 5 times over, right? You can do all of that and then some. So make sure you do not miss out. Take full advantage of your time at Arafah. And then next slide, on the 10th of Dhul Hijjah, it's known as Yawm al-Nahr, the day of slaughtering, because you go through Muzdalifah, you spend the night there, and I'll go over this right now. When you spend the night at Muzdalifah, I mentioned it's open air. There's no structures there for you to spend the night at. And you're going to collect your stones there. You don't have to, but you should. It's the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ used to do that. You want to make sure you have enough for all of the days that you're going to stone the Jamarat. Okay? If you only find enough and you get enough for the Jamrat al-Aqaba that you're going to stone on your way back to Mina on that day, then okay, that's fine. You can find stones somewhere else, but it's pretty easy to find stones there. And I'm pretty sure that the government lays out stones for people to find and pick up, right? Because they know you're gonna have millions of people trying to pick up pebbles, right? And please do not pick up giant rocks. Do not pick up a rock the size of your hand. The normal size of a pebble should be your fingertip, or a chickpea, right? Hummus, nothing larger than that, right? You don't need to accidentally hit somebody in the head with a baseball-sized rock and send them to the hospital. If a little pebble hits you in the head, you can shrug it off, right? Nothing's gonna happen. Yes. So you don't have to pray Maghrib in Arafah. You can pray once you get to Muzdalifah. So it's either or. It's not something you have to do. Or you can just pray Maghrib in Arafah, and then when you get to Muzdalifah, you can pray Isha. So it's not something that you have to do. It's not part of your Arafah, right? The part of Arafah is that you're just there between Maghrib and Dhuhr and Maghrib. Okay. So after Yawm al-Nahr, you go through Muzdalifah, collect your stones, you spend the night there. I mentioned if you're elderly or sick or even a female, you can leave halfway through the night. Logistically, this is nicer and easier. Or you stay until Fajr and you leave after Fajr. And on your way back, you pelt the big Jamara. It doesn't look any bigger, they're all the same size. It's just called the big Jamara or Jamrat al-Aqaba. It's the one closest to the Qibla or towards Mecca. And if you take the train, it'll be the first one that you pass by on your way back anyways. So you do that and make sure you get your numbers right too. You have 7 for the way back to Mina, right? 7 pebbles. Then you have to do 3 Jamarat for the 11th and the 12th. So at least you need to have 49 pebbles for your way back from Muzdalifah to Mina, and the 11th and 12th of Dhul Hijjah for pelting the Jamarat. If you stay on the 13th, then you need another 21 because you need 7 per jamara, 7 per pillar. So that's a total of 70 pebbles. Okay. Then when you get back, you do your animal sacrifice. I mentioned for the Hanafis, there's an order, right? Jamratul Aqaba, sacrifice, cut your hair, or shave. If you're not Hanafi, or you decide not to be Hanafi that day, which I don't recommend. You know, like I'm not Hanafi myself, but if there's no point in trying to jump between madhabs if it's something that you learn, something that you know. If it's something that, let's say you don't even have a madhab, you don't follow one, just do whatever your imam, your shaykh tells you to do at that time. If you have a Hajj group leader, go with them, don't ask any questions. Don't say that, oh, we're Hanafi, we have to do it this way. Okay, khalas, do it. Nobody's stopping you, no one's forcing you, nobody's pinning you down and shaving your head, right? That sounds more like a college prank where your friends all pin you down and they just something like that. Nobody's doing that to you. You're going to have your own freedom to do that. And then then you can, you know, after you've completed 3 or you go do those 3 in order, if you're Hanafi, you can get out of your ihram and then you can shower, do all those things, and then from then on, you're in Mina, and you just spend your time doing ibadah. Maybe you can take some books with you, seerah, some books of knowledge that you can benefit from, and just use your time wisely. You're going to be there praying the 5 prayers, you're going to be in Mina, you're going to be inside your tent most of the day, you're not going to be going anywhere else, right? I know some people, you know, mashallah, especially if they're staying in Aziziyah. I was rooming with this one uncle. He would literally disappear all day, because he would just leave his room and he would go to the Masjid al-Haram, and he would spend all day there. Right? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless him. Yes? So you can do Tawaf al-Ifada any time from the 10th to the 13th. Right? So you can, but most people go and do it on the 10th. But if you're unable to go and you don't want to be stuck in the rush, then you can delay it. But it's best to do it on the 10th. And then if you haven't done sa'i for Hajj yet, then you do your sa'i for Hajj. Or if you perform the Umrah first, then you have to perform your sa'i for Hajj after Tawaf al-Ziyarah, also known as Tawaf al-Ifada, before returning to Mina. So make sure you do your Tawaf and sa'i together. If you already did it, don't worry about your sa'i. If you didn't do it, make sure you do your Tawaf and sa'i together. Ayyam al-Tashriq, the days of drying meat, because you've already sacrificed your animal, and they're all, you know, maybe they're drying or they're being prepared for whatever. And during that time, you just, you know, you spend your time in Mina, you go to throw the jamara. Okay, so there are times in which you're supposed to throw the stones, right? So from midday until Maghrib, midday is the best time to do it, right? Zawal, that's the best time to do it. So around Dhuhr time, best time. You're allowed to between Dhuhr and Maghrib, okay? You shouldn't in the evening, right? So anytime before Zawal, it's not recommended. You're not supposed to pelt unless it's an emergency, right? Unless there's something that happened and you just have to. Otherwise, you're not supposed to do it. So try to do it during the day, anytime between Dhuhr and Maghrib, try to do it at Dhuhr time. Here's another thing. For whatever reason, if you can't do it yourself, you can have somebody do it on your behalf. But if you're completely capable of doing so, you should do it, right? You're not supposed to just, you know, you're feeling lazy or whatever and you have somebody else do it. You go and do it yourself, but if you can't, you can have somebody do it on your behalf. Just give them your pebbles, they do theirs first, and then they do it for you. And while you're pelting the jamara, I mentioned, I'll go into a little bit of the details. Just do one at a time. Don't just chuck all 7 at one time. You say Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, and you throw it. After you complete one, face the Qibla, make dua. This is the sunnah. Then you go to the second one. Pelt it 7 times. Bismillah, Allahu Akbar, each one. Face the Qibla, make dua. And I mentioned the Prophet ﷺ used to make long du'as after each jamara and long du'as at the mount of Safa and Marwa. After the third one, you know, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar 7 times. You don't have to make dua. The Prophet ﷺ didn't used to make dua after the third one. And there will be a giant sign, it'll say Qibla this direction. Then after that, it says here, if your sacrifice hasn't been done, it can be done during this time. If you haven't cut your hair, it can be done during this time, up until sunset of the 12th. Okay, no later than that. Do not delay it any more than this. Then the pilgrims will return to Makkah, perform Tawaf al-Wida. Regular Tawaf, that's it. You can do it in regular clothes. Make sure you have wudu. It should be the last thing you do in Makkah. Okay. Does that mean you can't go and grab some food because you're probably not going to be able to eat for like 10 hours? No, you can go and grab a meal. Okay? Just if it's something necessary, you get sick and you need to get some medicine, that's fine. But don't perform Tawaf al-Wida and then go shopping. Oh, I need to grab this thobe, this abaya, this perfume, this, that, these souvenirs, these gifts. Take care of all of that before. Don't do it after Tawaf al-Wida. It should be the last act that you do in Makkah, and then you depart. You can either you're going home or you're going to Medina. Okay, quickly, next slide. Fidya is something very important that a lot of people stress out about. I just want to say don't stress. Okay? Fidya is expiation when you make a mistake during Hajj or Umrah. It's to atone for the mistake. Sometimes it's mandatory, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have to do a certain type. Sometimes you have a choice between what type you want to do. So, next slide. It's obligatory when you violated any of the prohibitions of Ihram, such as applying perfume or cutting the hair, or failed to perform a wajib or obligatory act of Hajj. You didn't do Rami, you didn't do Jamara, or you did not enter into Ihram. And I'll go over real quick some of the things that you're not allowed to do during Ihram. You cannot cut your hair. You cannot, for men, you cannot wear clothes that fit to your form, right? So you wear ihram because they're loose garments. There's no sleeves, there's no pant legs, right? There's nothing to denote that it's for a particular part of your body. Men cannot do this, right? You cannot trim your nails. You cannot put on anything scented. What does this mean? If you buy unscented soap, don't be super picky and be like, I can smell the chemicals. No. Unscented means that there was no perfume added to it. If there's a natural scent, because it's like a chemical or it's like something to clean yourself, it's okay, right? But if it's extra scented, like if it's citrus or lavender or whatever it is, that's not okay, right? That's not okay. Most of the hotels, especially during Hajj time, they'll usually provide you with unscented soap, right? But you still want to make sure. So smell it. If there's no added perfume, then you're fine. If you get some on yourself, and if it was an accident, then you can do, fidya, but you should still make sure to try and get it off or wash it off, whatever you can. If it gets on your ihram, something gets on your ihram, you have to change your ihram. Before you get into ihram, let's say you take a bath, you use scented soap, scented shampoo, and this is from the sunnah actually. The Prophet ﷺ used to apply perfume directly to his skin, right? Not to his clothes, but he used to have Aisha radiallahu anha apply oil, scented oil, directly to his body. You can do this. It's not going to get on your ihram. The scent is not coming from the ihram, it's coming from you. So you rub it into your skin, make sure that it's not like a blob and it just gets on your ihram, otherwise you can't use that ihram. You can do this before you make your intention. So men, before you make your intention, if you put on some ithr, some scented oil directly to your skin and rub it in, you're fine. There's no problem afterwards once you make your intention. I mentioned trimming your hair. Some of the other things shouldn't be an issue. One second, let me finish the things that violate your ihram. Nobody here is going to go to Makkah and perform a nikah, right? You're not allowed to get your nikah and perform nikahs. You can't do that. Nobody's going to be doing this, right? You're not allowed to hunt. Nobody here is going to be hunting. If you're on the train and you see like a bird or like a sheep or something and you're starting to feel hungry, control yourself, okay? You don't need to hop off the train, and you're not going to be able to anyways, but nobody has to worry about hunting or any of these things, right? So it's fine. We don't have to worry too much. But things like women covering their face with a niqab, or men covering their... So women, if you wear niqab, you're allowed to cover your face around, you say strange men, but basically non-mahram, with the same cloth that you use to wrap your hijab. You cannot use a separate covering. Okay, so for most times the niqab is a separate covering that they attach. But if you use your hijab that you use to wrap your head, you can cover your face. The mothers of the believers, they used to do that when they were passing by a non-mahram. And while they were in ihram, they used to just cover their face with their the scarf that they used to wrap their head. But do not have a separate covering for your face. Women cannot wear gloves. Men cannot wear shoes, right? What we call shoes, right? If you're wearing flip-flops, it's okay. If you're wearing slides, it's okay. Crocs, I don't think so, because they're considered clogs, and clogs are a type of shoe, right? I wouldn't say Crocs are okay. If you're wearing those sandals that have the straps, just make sure the ankle is not strapped. You cannot strap your ankle, right? For Hanafis particularly, you're not allowed to cover the top of your foot. So for Hanafis, if you're very strict on that, then you just get, like those flip-flops, or what they call thongs, that go in between your toes. Slides aren't going to work. But if you're not and you want to wear slides, that's fine. Don't worry about it. You'll be okay, inshallah. So men cannot wear shoes. You shouldn't wear socks, anything like that. Women, you can. It's fine. Don't worry about that. You can wear shoes. You can wear socks. And then no intimacy between spouses. And so if you violate any of these things, you're going to have to pay some type of fidya. And I'll give you guys a resource to where you can look it up, because there is a long, extensive list. Like if you forget to make your niyyah, you have to give a dam. What is a dam? Let's go over that real quick. Okay, there we go. So, fidya, next slide, it can constitute of either a badana, a large sacrificial animal, so a cow or a camel. That usually is if you go hunting, and let's say you hunted a camel, then you have to give an equivalent of it, right? Or if you perform, or if you have intercourse and you have not got out of the second stage of ihram, then you have to sacrifice a large animal. You have to, it's obligatory. And on top of that, you have pretty much ruined your Hajj, so you got to make sure that you stay away from that, which is also why it probably makes sense that's recommended that husband and wife, if they're able to perform Hajj with another mahram, then they should do so. But it's usually not an issue. Dam is a small animal, goat or sheep, or you can share in a large animal. Up to 7 people can share in a cow or a camel. So 1/7 of a large animal, meaning a cow or a camel, or a small animal, meaning a sheep or a goat. Then sadaqah is another type of fidya, feeding 6 poor people. Usually this is for the lesser violations, and it's usually by choice. If you want to choose between the 3, if you want to do dam, sadaqah, or the last one, which is fasting 3 days. In other cases, let's say if you shave your head when you weren't supposed to, then you have to fast 3 days of Hajj and 7 days when you go back home. Right? You have to fast a total of 10 days in those cases. In minor offenses, you can just fast 3 days. But this is usually the last option. You should try to do the other. Like dam is always the best, but it can be a bit expensive and difficult. So if you can't do it, then you feed 6 poor people. Next slide. For Medina, I just wanted to go over, when you get to Medina, you're going to visit Masjid Nabawi. Usually your package will give you a tour. You'll visit Masjid Quba. Masjid Quba, if you make wudu and you pray there, pray 2 rak'ahs, you get the reward of an umrah. Right? So when you're going to Masjid Quba, try and make sure that you pray there. Try to make wudu from your hotel room. You can make wudu there too, it's not a big deal. You might visit some other sites like Uhud, the site of the Battle of Uhud, it's a mountain. You might visit Masjid Qiblatain. Right, and of course you'll be staying in and around Masjid Nabawi, and you'll be going there. Inside Masjid Nabawi you have, next slide, the Prophet's grave. You should go and give salam to the Prophet's grave. And the Prophet's grave he's buried within his home next to his companions, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. And between his home and his mimbar is, on the next slide, the Rawda, which the Prophet ﷺ said, مَا بَيْنَ بَيْتِي وَمِنْبَرِي رَوْضَةٌ مِّن رِيَاضِ الْجَنَّةِ. Whatever is between my home, which is now the grave of the Prophet ﷺ, and his mimbar, which is the mimbar that is still used to this day, is a garden from the gardens of paradise. So it is a piece of heaven on earth. For the women, when you go to the Rawda, you give your salam to the grave of the Prophet ﷺ from there. You're actually, technically, physically closer to the Prophet's body from there than the men would be, where you pass in the front and you give salam. So that is one advantage you have. Also, if you all have already registered on the Nusuk app and you have and you're able to book an appointment, I don't know how it works during Hajj, but at least for Umrah, you have to book appointments to go to the Rawda, and they fill up literally like 4 or 5 months in advance. So please, if you can do it from now. Try and get your dates and your timings situated so that you can go into the Rawda. Otherwise, you don't know when you'll be able to go, and many people feel sad about this. Do not miss out on that. If you can go, then please do go. And in the Rawda, there's nothing special to do. You can pray and spend time in there, make dua, make dhikr. You're in a portion of Jannah. There's a lot of history there. You can read up on it as well. This was all part of the original part of Masjid Nabawi. You had a question?
I just wanted to say, during Hajj, they mentioned you cannot book anything until 3 days prior.
3 days prior?
They made it really strict.
Okay, cool. So thank you for that. 3 days prior, make sure that, like, on the dot, right, that you...
Before leaving, exactly, maybe, if you possibly can do that.
Okay, so I'm sure maybe your Hajj group will update you on that info, but please make sure you get that information. There's a lot of people, they don't know, they don't do it, and then they miss out. People go for Umrah and they miss out, or they can't do it. And for Medina, it's very peaceful. A lot of people, you go and you do your prayers there, and make sure you try and pray every salah in Masjid al-Nabawi. Don't miss out on that opportunity as well. And in Mecca, anywhere in Mecca, your prayer is worth 100,000. But in Medina, you have to be praying in Masjid al-Nabawi. If you're part of the Jama'ah, the greater Jama'ah, even if it's outside in the courtyard, you still get that reward because you're part of the main Jama'ah. But if you're praying on your own, make sure you pray inside Masjid al-Nabawi. That is where you get the reward of 1,000, not anywhere in Medina, right? It's in Masjid al-Nabawi. Mecca, the entire city is a haram. So if you're in the boundaries of Mecca, any prayer anywhere in the boundaries of the city counts as 100,000. For Medina, there's really not much else. There's a nice walkway that you can take between Masjid Nabawi and Masjid Quba that they built recently. It's very nice. You might want to try and do it maybe at nighttime so it's not so hot outside. And then finally, let's go into some extras. I have this QR code. Oh, it didn't update. Okay, I had also added a website, but I'll just tell you guys what the website is. This QR code, if you want to scan it, it gives you like basically a packing list, and it tells you of things that you should expect to take with you, what you shouldn't take with you, not what you shouldn't take with you, but you'll get it. Whatever it asks you to take, you should probably take. Anything that you might need. It's at least a good start so that you don't miss out on some things, and if you need to add to it, you can add to it. And then there's a very good website for resources, especially to look up what the violations are and what you have to pay. There's a long list, and I recommend that you guys go over it. Like I said, if you violate your ihram in some way, it's not the end of the world. Usually you just have a choice, either dam, a sacrifice, or you feed 6 poor people, which is also very easy to do, or if you can't do either of those, you fast for 3 days, or you can fast for 3 days regardless. If you can do dam or sadaqah. And it's called hajjumrahplanner.com. Honestly, if you look up Hajj, it's like one of the first hits on Google. Hajj, Hajj, Umrah, UMRAH, planner.com. So that website has a lot of resources. It has a lot of things that it can tell you, especially like I mentioned, look up the violations and penalties. And also myself personally, I this is kind of a plug for myself. I have contact through some of my connections. We have contact with local shepherds in Mecca. They bring animals, camels, sheep, goats. It's usually just goats and camels. But if anybody has trouble with their dam or their fidya for a sacrifice, if they want to do a dam, or if they just want to do extra for charity, which also is a forgotten sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ, every Eid, especially Eid al-Adha, he would send a charity or a udhiyah to Mecca to feed the poor of Mecca. And remember, when you have to give a sacrifice, you can't just do it anywhere around the world. Your dam has to be for the people of Mecca. That is a requirement. So you can't say that, oh, I'll just give dam in my country back home or this country. Some of the countries, they will send it to other places if everything in Mecca has been taken care of, but usually the primary purpose is to distribute the meat to the people of Mecca. So I can help organize that as well. It's usually much cheaper than what you find in other places. Even in Saudi, it's usually pretty comparable to their prices. So if you're interested in that, then you can reach out to me, inshallah. I'll give a phone number, and or you can come up to me, or you can contact me on social media, inshallah. With that being said, that's about it. I don't think we have time right now for Q&A, but if anybody would like to ask me questions after Salah, I'll be more than happy to answer them. This is concerning Hajj and Umrah. Please, no other questions at this time. If you want to ask me other questions about other things, then you can try and catch me some other time, bidhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullahu khairan. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a beneficial gathering, a gathering in which we are able to gather in Jannah as well, a gathering in which we have remembered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger, and a gathering in which we have learned beneficial knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make this a means of goodness for us. May He bless all of you who are going for Hajj. May He grant you safe passage. May He grant you a safe return. May He grant you a Hajj mabrur. And we ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow you to remember to make dua for all of us who are unable to go. May He allow all of us to go and perform Hajj if we have not performed it before, and to allow us to return and perform Hajj if we have performed it before, and to allow us to continue to perform Hajj and Umrah often, as long as He wills us to, and to accept it all from us, and to forgive us for our sins and our shortcomings, and to grant us patience and sincerity. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala send the best of peace and blessings upon our beloved Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika wa nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.